I need you to look at something. This is a skull from a battlefield in northern Germany. It's 3,250 years old. And if you look right here, at the back of the head, you can see something embedded into the bone. That is a bronze arrowhead. It's been there since 1250 BC. The arrow passed through the skull and the man was dead before he hit the ground. He was one of at least 150 people who died at the same river crossing on the same day. Their bones lay preserved in a peat bog until 1996, when one of them came out of the German riverbank and started the recovery of the oldest battlefield ever found in Europe. My name's Joe and this is one Buried Earth video that is well worth your time. So, northern Germany, the Tollense River in the state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, 1996. A bone in the riverbank. It was a human upper arm bone, a humerus, and driven into the shoulder joint, still embedded after over 3,000 years, was a flint arrowhead. The bone should not have survived. Almost nothing from Bronze Age Europe survives this well. The bones rot away, the wood rots with them, the metal corrodes to almost nothing. 3,000 years is a long time for anything to last. This bone had survived because it had fallen into water, into the wet peat of an old river channel. This is where oxygen could not get to it. And it was not alone. Archaeologists came to the site. They dug small trenches around the original find. The trenches produced more bones, then thousands more after that. Word got out along local heritage volunteers and divers. For more than a decade, teams of volunteer divers from the Regional Underwater Archaeology Association searched the river. They worked through the riverbed in sections, recording everything that they found. They recovered hundreds of bones, then thousands of bones. Metal finds started coming up too, bronze arrowheads, fragments of weapons, and personal items. By 2007 and 2008, the scale of what was in the river was undeniable. This was not just a few isolated burials, and it was not a Bronze Age cemetery. It was a battlefield. The project spread along a 3-kilometer stretch of river. Multiple sites were excavated. Weltsin 20, Weltsin 28, Wardag and others, each one producing more and more material. By the time the excavators had finished what they could of the riverbed, what they had found defied everything anyone thought they knew about the Bronze Age of Europe. The numbers became extraordinary. Approximately 12,500 bones recovered from the river and its margins. The minimum number of individuals identified from these bones was at least 150 people. Around 90 of them were from a single section of the battlefield called Weltsin 20. But the demographic was the strangest part. These were not random villagers. The dead were overwhelmingly young adult men, 20s and 30s, almost no women, and almost no children. No elderly. This was a fighting force. And here's what makes Tollense unique in European archaeology. Most Bronze Age conflicts are known from a single bone, maybe a damaged skull or a settlement burial, a buried weapon, a scrap of context. Tollense produced bones from at least 150 fighters, plus weapons and horse remains and the landscape that they died in. It all existed because of where they fell. The dead had ended up in a wet, peat-rich river environment with very low oxygen. The same conditions that has preserved the founding humerus in 1996 has preserved an entire battlefield. Bronze Age Europe lost almost every battle it ever fought, archaeologically speaking, because bones decomposed and the weapons corroded. History vanished. Tollense was the exception. The river had kept what nothing else could. But the question now was, who were these men and what exactly had killed so many people in one place? The bones gave us the first answer. They were not the bones of people who had died naturally. They were riddled with violence, arrowhead injuries, bronze points and flint points still embedded in vertebrae, in ribs, in pelvises, in skulls, blunt force trauma, depressed fractures across multiple skulls, consistent with the impact of wooden clubs, close combat wounds, slicing injuries, puncture wounds, defensive cuts on the arm bones of fighters that tried to block what was coming at them, and every injury was peri-mortem. It had happened at the moment of death, not before, not after. There was no healing. These people did not die one at a time over generations. They had all died together in a single moment of violence. And then there was the skull from the very beginning of this video. The one with the bronze arrowhead embedded into the back of its head. The arrow had been fired from close range. The man had been killed instantly. He had been shot from behind, running away or just unaware of what was coming. That skull is one of the most photographed pieces of evidence of the entire battlefield. The image has been published in the University of Göttingen and part of their press release for the most recent major paper on Tollense. This tells you almost everything you need to know about what happened here in 1250 BC. This was a battle. The dead were fighters, and the fighting was close and brutal. It was a battle on a scale that Bronze Age Europe was not supposed to be capable of. But the next question was harder. Who was fighting, and where had they come from? There was a particular spot on the battlefield called Welsin 28. It was upstream from the main bone concentrations. In 2019, archaeologists published a detailed study of one find in this spot, a cluster of 31 bronze objects found tightly grouped on the riverbed. They had not been scattered there over time, they had been carried, and researchers could partially reconstruct what they were carried in. 3 rolled bronze sheet cylinders with perforations and small nails on them. These were the findings from a bag or a small wooden box. The fittings had once held an organic container together. The container itself rotted away hundreds of years ago, but the bronze fittings stayed. A small wooden stick had probably been used to close the bag up, but what was inside was a knife or sickle, a chisel, and all with a birch of wood handle. The wood survived 3,250 years in peat, a twisted bronze wire ornament, a small bronze ring, ingots, that's chunks of raw metal, casting waste, and scrap. All of this was somebody's personal kit, a man's tools and his scrap metal, his belongings taken with him into battle and lost in the water. And the closest typological matches for what was in this bag are not local either. The contents match warrior burials from southern Germany or eastern France. That is at least 700 kilometers south of where the bag was found. This man had walked or marched across half of Europe to die in this river. A human skull and a rib were found at the exact same spot of the bag. We can't prove that these bones belonged to the bag owner, but the materials don't match anybody local. And the question now was no longer whether someone had come from far away, it was how many of them were there. In 2024, a team led by Leif Inselman at the Free University of Berlin published the most important paper of the Tollense in a decade. They had done something nobody had done before. They had taken 54 of the bronze arrowheads recovered from the battlefield and compared every single one, its shape, its casting style, and how it attached to the shaft, against 4,743 arrowheads from across Bronze Age Central Europe. It was an enormous comparison, it was years of work, but what it found was decisive. The flint arrowheads from Tollense matched local Nordic Bronze Age types. These were the weapons from fighters from the region, from northern Germany itself. But many of the bronze arrowheads did not match. The bronze arrowheads matched types from far away, specifically from a region between present-day Bavaria and Moravia, hundreds of kilometers south of the battlefield. One particular type of bronze arrowhead, a barbed form called Type 4C, does not occur anywhere in northern Germany, except in Tollense. There was a spatial pattern on the battlefield itself. The downstream sites like Welsin 20 where the main bone concentration was found, were dominated by local weapons. The upstream sites, including Welts in 28, was where the bag was found, contained the foreign types of findings. Leif Enzelman put it this way: some of the warriors clearly came from southern Central Europe. Thomas Treberger at the University of Göttingen called the findings the earliest evidence of warfare across regions in Central Europe. This is the best current reading of the evidence. This does not mean Tollense was a clean north versus south battle with two armies in neat lines. The picture is much more complex than that. But it does mean that warriors did come from hundreds of kilometers away to this river to die. And what that confirmed forced researchers to rewrite something much bigger than just one battlefield. Before Tollense, the standard view of Bronze Age Northern Europe ran something like this: small settlements, small populations, low coordination, and very limited warfare. In 1250 BC, this region was thought to have been a patchwork of villages and farming communities, raids between neighbours sometimes, killings sometimes, but nothing approaching coordinated large-scale combat. The reason nobody had found a Bronze Age battlefield in Europe before was because it was quite possible that there had never been one. Tollense overturned that view in a single discovery. This was hundreds of fighters, some of them from at least two distinct regions. Some had travelled 700 kilometers or more just to be there. Some had carried personal kits, suggesting they were experienced warriors, men who carried their tools and their bronze with them. The dead are almost entirely made up of young men killed in close combat at a fortified river crossing. This was organised warfare across regions. In 1250 BC in Northern Europe, some researchers now use the word army cautiously because the scale of what happened at Tollense was unprecedented for that period. But what it does show is that Bronze Age Europe was capable of something nobody had thought possible, a kind of warfare we believed emerged thousands of years later. The history of European conflict starts earlier than the history books said. It starts at this river, and the river itself has one more thing to show us. A few hundred meters from where the bone concentrations were, archaeologists found something else. A wooden crossing, a causeway built over the wetland, 3 meters wide at the base, made of sand and turf laid over a wooden structure. In some sections, rows of stones lined the edges, and in the wetter ground, sturdy wooden posts had been driven into the marsh. And here is the part of the landscape evidence that changes the framing of the entire battlefield. The earliest phase of this causeway dates back to 1900 BC. That is 600 years before this battle. 600 years, the same crossing, used and repaired for centuries before anyone died at it. A horse tooth recovered from the area shows the crossing was still actively used in the 13th and 12th centuries BC, right around the time of the battle. This was not a random spot. It was a long-established route through difficult terrain, a causeway 600 years older than the men that died beside it. One reading of this evidence, the battle was fought for control of this crossing, a strategic point on a major trading route, perhaps along an early version of the Amber Road that ran between the Baltic and the Mediterranean. This is a plausible reading of the landscape, but it has not been proven. The motive of the battle is still unknown, and there's also one more layer of evidence to add, from the chemistry inside of the teeth and the DNA inside of the bones. In 2019, researchers tested strontium isotopes from 52 teeth from the Tollense dead. What strontium tests measure is the chemistry of the soil and water where a person grew up, and it gets locked in their teeth as a child. The teeth carry a signature for life. By analysing the teeth, you can tell roughly where this person was raised. And the result from Tollense, some of the sampled people did not grow up in northern Germany. They had grown up somewhere else. In 2020, a separate team sequenced ancient DNA from 14 of the dead. They found shared and central Northern European ancestry, but no clean regional groupings inside of the sample. This is important. The DNA does not show two genetically distinct populations facing each other across the field. Together, the DNA and the isotopes tell us this: people came from different places, they fought together and against each other, and the population at this battlefield was mixed in ways a clean two-army interpretation cannot capture. It was probably more of a coalition war than a tribal raid. Some of these men probably knew each other, some had marched together, and some had marched against each other. And yet, everything we know about who they were and where they came from, bones, weapons, isotopes, DNA, a 600-year-old causeway, there is still one thing science cannot explain. In 1250 BC, at the same time 1,000 or more warriors were dying at a river in Germany, the Egyptians under Rameses II were carving their military victories into stone temples that still stand today. In Greece, the Mycenaeans are keeping an inventory record on clay tablets in Linear B, including records of military movements. And Anatolia, the Hittites were drafting written treaties with neighbouring kingdoms. All three of these civilizations had writing. All three of them had traded with regions that touched Northern Europe. None of them mentioned this battle. And closer to home, no oral tradition survived the centuries that followed. No medieval chronicle preserves the memory of this valley. No name in modern Mecklenburg-Vorpommern points to a great fight here. Nothing. A battle of this scale in 1250 BC, with warriors from hundreds of kilometers apart, should have been the most important event in Northern European memory for generations. It should have been a story told by firelight for thousands of years. It wasn't. We don't know why a war this large left no trace in human memory at all. There were possibilities though. Number one, both sides took such heavy losses that the people who would have remembered died on the battlefield. Another option is the social structures that preserve memory collapsed in the wider Bronze Age turbulence of that era. Or perhaps the most simple answer is that it was remembered for a while and the memory just didn't survive over 3,000 years. But the honest answer is, we don't know. It's very likely we will never know. The biggest Bronze Age battle ever found in Europe, completely lost to human memory. Until 1996, until that bone came out of the riverbank.